Welcome back to It Takes a Village. I am Reverend Dr. Jenny Schultz-Thomas, your host, and I'm joined with Sarah Rental-Jones. Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here today. So this podcast is aptly named It Takes a Village, and it does take a village, we know. We're standing here in the Coffee Commons at Countryside with no electricity. About an hour ago, somebody heard a couple of booms, and I guess the grid is off. But we have Jack and Dan and lots of extension cords and great trusty mics. And so we're bringing you this message and this opportunity to engage in the context of uncertainty. So David Brooks, How to Know a Person. He calls it an art, the art of seeing others and being deeply seen. So where are we right now, Sarah?
We are in the third section, part 3, I See You With Your Strengths. So we are in the final third of the book, and we are talking today about 2 of those chapters, chapters 13 and 14. And chapter 13 starts with personality. What energy do you bring into the room? And here we have the kind of earth-shattering information that David Brooks doesn't care for the Myers-Briggs inventory.
Yes. No Myers-Briggs.
No Myers-Briggs, which all of us have taken.
Taken multiple times.
And gotten
written our
used.
life by the Myers-Briggs,
Yeah.
but throw it out, people. No
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs. So what then?
So he talks about this big 5 personality traits. And I was telling you earlier, I actually did go online and Googled this and took it. And so there's lots of opportunities online to take a free assessment to see what your big 5 are. And they could be extroversion, openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, which some have modified because I think that word is a little loaded, and agreeableness. So those are the 5 options. And when you take a test, then you will score kind of, what is your top, and then down to like what are you least like.
Okay, that's right. And right, I was rereading this again, kind of what are we going to talk about and what really caught me. And I underlined so many things, right, months ago, and then going back to again. I didn't underline a whole lot in any of these different categories. I remember underlining the whole Myers-Briggs is a false binary, bam, bam, bam. And then that all these psychologists have pointed to these big 5, but then you kind of read through them. And I think this is always how I feel when I'm doing personality tests or even the Herman brain, which is like science-based. They all have a little bit of science there, but how it's manifested, I always think, gosh, I want to be all those things. And then, I don't want to be any of those things, right? And so you kind of find yourself evolving, right? And he talks about this as we age, we're somewhere a little bit different on the scale. But there are a lot of extremes, right? So I think the beauty of personality, right, is that some of it's the nature nurture. Like we're born as who we are, and then we opportunity to thrive as we're nurtured into who, is inside of us to grow. But so often we come up against like a really difficult cultural, societal experience. Some of us, right, aren't afforded the opportunity to really grow fully into that personality. And so then you have to take steps, right, to materialize these different skills that allow you to get over these hurdles, right? Maybe there's a reason that someone is really neurotic based on a traumatic experience of how they grew up. So I think the important thing is these are just traits and openness of diagramming how we show up in the world, but there's so much nuance to who we really are, right, and who our spirit is nurtured to be. You said you kind of found yourself somewhere on this scale and it really resonated.
Yeah, I was most open. So openness is my highest trait. And I've often been told by people that they find me very open, and I've wondered what that means. And so it was actually helpful to read about this and to think that, openness is something that is kind of represented by being willing to try new things or try on new ideas, as he says. And I think that does describe me. I always love to learn new things, and I love learning about different cultures and thinking, there's so many ways to do something. Like when you live in a different setting, right, you learn that not all the values that you hold as sort of like a white person from the East Coast are values that are strongly held in Hawaii. Like living there, is probably the most stark example of that, whether it's to do with timeliness or manners, different ways that, I remember one of the things in Hawaii is that you go into a room and you greet people that are there. You don't just get to work. You first, acknowledge the humans that are present, and you greet them, and then you kind of get into like the purpose of why you're there. So different things like that. Like, I just love to learn about those different cultural practices. So I guess that is kind of what ties in with openness.
Yeah.
That makes sense that that's my top score.
Openness and then leaning in, like the life choices that you've made really kind of point to that. If you're not open, you really maybe aren't open to taking those, opening those new doors. That whole greeting people. I remember being in West Africa and on the road learning this, like, because I think this sort of hyper-capitalist society that we've built, right? And we've talked a lot about this. I played my own big part in that. I'm a fast talker. I'm a fast walker. I'm always high on the achievement. You need to do on these scales. But going and immersing yourself and living in a culture that it's more relational, it's relation-based, not time-based. So be on the road going, 20 minutes just to go buy bread or something. And everyone stops and they're like, Lapita, Lapitana, Zaina, all these questions asking the same thing. It's like, how is your family? How is your aunt? How is the health of your family? And I remember the first few times just sort of watching. I felt like a voyeuristic, like, I'm just observing how beautiful and meaningful it is to not worry about where you're going or what time you're going to get there. But you are definitely caught in the grip of this moment and this exchange. And it's it's not a gesture like we might say, hey, Sarah, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. See you later. It's, I really want to know how your family is. And so you might be stopped on the road for 10 minutes, just greeting everyone going and coming. So that openness, right, allows you to have that imprint, right? You take it on, and then it becomes a part of you. I'm not sure that it's been a full part of me. I still have a way, to go to get there, but I love that you shared that. It really brought that up for me, too.
Yeah. Was there anything else in this particular chapter or any of these other traits that resonated with you?
Yeah. In reading these, I felt like I've always been sort of this, as a middle child, I've always been sort of this peacemaker personality. So agreeableness is kind of a natural kind of thing for me, but also with the achievement and analytical brain and like high level of intellectualizing things to get done. I oftentimes have this compartmentalized way of showing up where it's, okay, have this work to get done. Here's the goal. So I need to make sure we get to this goal, right? And then in the midst of ministry, like the goal, it's like the ministry of interruptions, right? The goal is not sort of like the bottom line. I'm going to write this, or I'm going to send that, or it's who is in front of you right now. And so it reifies the priorities of agreeableness in terms of peacemaking. It's really, you have to show up as you are, but invite someone else to be fully present as who they are. And if you're just looking at your desk with, I have somewhere to go, I have these goals, it allows me to both have these high level of priorities, but also to prioritize, right, the humans and the work and the amazing kind of empathetic kind of love exchange that we have, right, on a church, in a congregation. So I think it's a little bit of seeing yourself here, and then which things can you kind of grow into, and which ones can help you, refine who you are and how you show up in the world.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to dive into these. I'm sure our congregants and your village houses, I'm sure this would be such a great, exciting conversation to have, asking each other, like, what resonates? Where do you see yourself on these scales? Does the Myers-Briggs, do you love it? Toss it, which personality tests or opportunities allow you to explore deeply who you are and how you see each other.
Yeah, definitely. And if you, as he says, he talks about going online and taking any number of questionnaires if you want to take them and see how you score. Just don't pay for them, because there's tons that are free, but then the free ones always try to sell you the extended report that is like $29.99 or something like that.
I can tell you exactly who you are if you pay the premium.
Right, exactly. We don't need to know all of that. We just need sometimes a little insight. It's helpful to see how we score in an objective measure. Yeah, we are. So our next chapter, life tasks. I just have to say, when it started with babies and toddlers and all the way up, I started just thinking as a parent, of course, being trapped in this, developmental psychology.
kind of, we grew up in the era of parenting where all the parenting books were lining the shelves. And you're kind of looking for the right way to do things, not fully given to that, but having a little bit of that wisdom of understanding how children develop, and then a little bit of your mother or your grandmother and their wisdom, right? And then discerning kind of what's the right way. And so reading this chapter, I think it gives a lot of permission to realize that who we are informs the tasks that we prioritize or how we go about these tasks. And for me, I think rearing kids is one of the most prominent in my life right now, right? Because of the age of my kids. So right off the bat, I just started thinking about the task of agency, like this imperial task around developing agency and helping your children, right, to have agency. And that, I think, was kind of lost on maybe the generations ahead of us. It was be obedient, like we were talking about, and maybe affirming your child's agency wasn't really the nucleus of what it means to foster their development.
Right. Yeah, it was really, I think, a lot about conformity. And even as I was, having my kids when they were little, I was thinking they should conform. Like, if I am a good mother, then I will give them commands, I guess. And
Right.
it sounds like even
unto the
foolish,
Lord.
right?
Yes.
and they'll conform, and then if I can make them listen to me and follow my directions, then that I've been a good mother. And so, of course, my children quickly disabused me of that notion because they are good kids and they didn't always follow my directions. And so I did get to learn that they had their sense of agency. They really taught me that, and taught me to work with them and listen to them. And I know we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the idea that even if your children don't do what you say, that the things you're teaching them are still making an impact. Like they might
Right.
not be following the guidance that you give them, but every now and then you can see that they have heard it and they have taken it in.
Right.
And that can be kind of rewarding to see, and at least get to experience that they've picked up on something in the household. And
Right. That we are not
conversation.
complete mom failures.
Right.
That we are
No,
doing
definitely
it.
not.
Not at all. Yeah, so he lays out these different tasks, and probably as you read this book and talk with your own groups or just think about these things, something else will kind of lift off the page for you. This imperial task, as we've just talked about, he says that he's looking back at Erik Erikson's work, of course, and Erikson argues that a person has to either display industry or succumb to inferiority, just right off the bat. Those are high stakes, right? So I think this whole notion that developmental psychology used to say, this is who you were, and you're going to be, you are going to be who you are no matter what. Here's just how we support that growth. But then future understanding in psychology says that we are always malleable and we're always growing, right? And I love the science of epigenetics here because it also talks about how we are interacting with our community and with others, even generations past, and how we are being changed. Like, we are being shaped and we are being encouraged kind of to live into the fullness of who we are. So there's different ways, I think, to ask questions about these tasks. And these are just a few of them. I mean, the interpersonal task, he almost counters that with career consolidation, right? Here's this imperial task. I must conquer, I must know who I am, I must meet all of my challenges, right? And then interpersonal, I will achieve intimacy or suffer isolation. Again, a false binary, right, that Erikson has pointed out. So then how do we do both? Well, he talks about there are different ways that people do that. And then he move into either, right, career consolidation, or maybe you're just somebody who doesn't have to have one intense career and know the path, right? So I love that he says these are false binaries and gives a window into understanding how I think our society sees human evolution across the age spectrum.
Right. Yeah, and definitely kind of just thinking about the way that life happens, even on the way to having what we think we want. Some of the really impactful stories have to do with people who were so determined in their careers and so just really convinced that they wanted to meet a goal. This story about Christina Perry Rossi that she wrote this. I mean, thankfully, it is a short story. It's not about a real person, but just this idea that a runner would have this immense goal and be so single-mindedly focused and then be doing it and feel this desire to stop. And I still am sitting with that because I don't quite know what to make of it. I really want the person to finish the race. So I don't know what that says about me. I guess I both want them to have their agency to be able to stop when they want. And I'm worried that this character will have a sense of regret later. Why didn't they just go the final distance and be able to complete what they had set their mind to originally?
I know. I love the following. So after this, Brooke says, it's not that all desire is quenched at the end of this task. It's just that one set of desires has been satisfied. People in this moment of crisis can suddenly get gripped by thicker and bigger desires. And that's sort of at the end of this career consolidation. What that reminds me of, I think it was the first time that I traveled to the developing world. I was in Ouagadougou, West Africa, and I was like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm called to do human relief and working with AIDS victims and helping like children have, natural opportunities to thrive, teach English. I had this list of all these things, right? And I felt so called to this ministry. And then I got this really bad sickness called the water disease. And I mean, there's lots of different things, right, that you can fall sick to there. But I remember just being in this couple's home and sitting on the couch and kind of praying out like, okay, God, you brought me all the way over here to do all these amazing things, and I'm just supposed to sit on the couch. And for me, it was this really, it's a life lesson that we can have different initiatives and goals and calls, and they might be amazing. It might be like this life's work, but the thing that we're called to is presence. Presence with self, and presence to be like whole and healthy and full. And so, just think about this runner. It's like running the race, and the goal, you want them to finish the race. I wanted to get off the couch, right? But it's sort of this, wow, it's not just, the destination and the ends to the means conversation. It's like, well, what can I learn on this couch? And I didn't want to be learning on the couch. I wanted to be helping. But it has continued to be like a North Star experience for me. It's like, wow, there's so much I can learn about myself. And hopefully I will take these pieces and be a little bit more whole than the person who just has the list and feels like, my own worth is caught up in how much I do for someone else, right? And so kind of seeing yourself and making sure you attend to self, like laying here on the side of the racetrack or whatever. Yeah, so that's, I think we have lots of questions, right? In the middle of this trajectory. Like, who writes that trajectory? What are those goals? Right? And where are we in the evolution of finding our own deep spiritual call in there?
Right. Because I do think, and I get it, that this is not necessarily a spiritual or religious book. It has to do with our spirits because it's part of who we are, and how we see each other and know each other is a spiritual act. But at the same time, he's not necessarily bringing in faith. And so maybe that's something to talk about in groups. Like, how does your faith impact how you read this and what you think about it? Because, we all know of different situations where our path just completely diverges and things that are out of our control, like what you're describing just there with the illness that came up, where you're powerless against it. And then how do you respond, and how do you maybe interpret that, because you are a person of faith, as something that God has used to give you direction? I think a lot of times we see through a different lens when we're seeing through what we, how we feel that God has shaped us and guided us, versus thinking everything is within our own will.
Yeah, I know, right? We like to think that we can make a list and have initiatives and work really hard to get there, and you might not be able to finish the race for lots of various reasons.
Right.
And I'm not one of those people who thinks that we are puppets on a string and that, right, everything is destined or predestined. But in there, how do we, like you're saying, how do we receive, right, the circumstances in our life and really then alter our view, right? You're going to be sitting on the couch anyway. So you could either, just sort of like read the book and crochet or learn to do all the things you failed at, or you could start to think, wow, what else is there that I can soak up? And, I was able to soak up so much by sharing so much time with the many members of the household and those who worked all across this campus, and learning and observing their relationships. And again, this familial commitment to relationships versus sort of the outcomes, right? So when we're off the track, we kind of look down and realize like, oh, wait, maybe I'm planted right in the middle of the track that I need to be on right now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, and then so the next section in this chapter is about the generative task. And here we have this character of Adam Newman, who ended up being quite excellent in so many parts of his life, but also was described as his daughter as an extreme achievement perfectionist. And David Brooks writes that she later told the researchers that her father, had permanently destroyed her self-esteem. So then we have someone with so much on a one-track mind and achieving these goals, and yet is having some difficult relationships. And then in the middle of his life, he decides to go to the developing world and goes to Sudan and works with local farmers, and then really like totally changes as a person.
Yes, completely. Which, I mean, you almost read this, and this is part of the grant study, right, where they're following all these graduates of Harvard at this certain time in our history, and it's all these men, and one of the things that we found was that their outcomes were really mostly based on their early relationships, like friendships and familial relationships. And that's wonderful and surprising. But here you have this, gentleman, Mr. Newman, he ran the biostatistics department at NASA, right? And then he has this pretty soured relationships with his daughters. And one of the comments, and this is like hurts your heart, that he said in middle age, he confessed that when he thought of his mother, he wanted to vomit. He said, all my life, I have had my mother's dominance to battle against. And so you think of this, kind of this nurturing of agency within each generation, our own children, and giving them the support that they need, right, to be able to find who they are in the world and to feel good about that self. This man, kind of had a really difficult early childhood, but I think the but here is that he changed course. He was still able to listen, right, to his inner soul, listen to his children probably, and then he had a life-changing experience by being open, Sarah, right, and traveling to another place where it's almost like put yourself in the laboratory of learning that you need to counter the circumstances and the personal narrative that has been shaping your life. And he gave himself that opportunity, and then he really did become a different person. He said he didn't recognize, right? He became such a different person that the proctor of that study sent him his earlier notes, and he said, I don't even know who that man was. It was like a really wonderful story about redemptive, choosing self and choosing the better course in the second part of your life.
Yeah. And talking about this way in which after we go through this career consolidation, if that's the track our life takes, and then we get into this generative task of, okay, I've sort of done the things that I set my mind to that maybe were sort of self-driven, self-seeking. Now I want to guide others and give back. And we do see that so much, how people will take the time in retirement to mentor others or to get more involved as volunteers. And so I think that's a really beautiful way that we continue to give to society. We continue to give to younger people. Thankfully, there's like repair here in these stories about the way that we can still do more, even if we've made mistakes earlier in our lives.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. We working as a pastor in ministry, it's sort of the privilege of our life to be able to walk alongside people at every step of the way, right? And there are these natural junctures in life where we're kind of crossing over a threshold and then looking back, right? And this one sort of at this, retirement age, if you will, right? This 66 to 70 years old. There's so many people who are kind of looking back and then looking forward and wanting to leave a legacy, right? And our church is upheld by all of these. I mean, you who are Village Houses, you are part of this community. You have, blood, sweat, and tears throughout your life to build this beloved community, and now are continuing, right, to push us to serve outside the boundaries of the congregation, right, looking outside, moving to the Tri-Faith Commons. So I think the redemptive piece is amazing because, again, what psychologists used to say is here, this is who you are, and your life is kind of set. Not maybe the choices you're going to make, but who you are and how you're going to show up in the world. And I think what we know now is that we are who we are, and we always can make choices to put ourselves in places to make change and to change ourselves, that we might impact others in a better, more generative way than maybe we have before. And that's life-giving. I mean, I think that's kind of the love of God, like showing up, right? And choosing that love changes us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the final little piece of this chapter talks about integrity versus despair. And this is kind of the final task in life. Certainly can be over the course of quite a few years. But people who are coming to terms with their mortality and making decisions about how they want to spend their time up until the end of their lives, and the ways in which they want to give back. And there's this really poignant story of a historian's mother who then has a stroke and can't speak. And at first she was bitter about it, but then she was able to just be present with her grandchildren and be affectionate. And I just think that's so precious. I think about my dad, who actually had a stroke when I was in college, and he did regain his speech, but he was thinking that he would never lose his speech. Like, felt like his worst nightmare, because he was a minister and a preacher. And so, it's, as a child of someone going through that, of course it's like, even if he couldn't talk, I would certainly want him around and want to spend time with him. And so, that's part, I think, of what we really learn about presence in that last part of life, where maybe we aren't as active as we were before, but we certainly still have plenty to offer, and often through even more intimate relationship with people.
No, I think if nothing else, right, to live is to choose each day how we show up in the world. And I think we had a conversation this week in our staff meeting about the NAP ministry, right? Rebecca brought these really great meditative cards, and this whole idea that Tricia Hershey leads the NAP ministry, and she's from Georgia. But kind of this resistance, rest is a form of resistance, is what the NAP ministry, it's about liberation theology, but really it's about choosing how today you're going to honor the sacred self. And when you honor the sacred self, you honor all the other sacred selves around you. And, as you think about these different tasks, it's really pointing us to, again, the evolution of the human story. If you kind of looked on and everything was kind of going as planned, you would see, right, this early shaping, this middle shaping, and this sort of longer last stages of life. But we all have a choice how we show up, how we invite people in, and how we see ourselves shaping the context of our own lives. And I think the beauty in faith is that we know and have a radical love with a God who is also showing up each day with us. When we say, I want to take one step, God is with there to take the next step, right? So this is just a little, right, a blip into the human story. So we hope that what David Brooks has offered here and that we are able to talk about with you gives you some insights also into your own life and some encouragement to face the days and the weeks. But thank you so much for joining us here on It Takes a Village. We'll see you next time.
Yes, and hopefully with power on for the whole session. You can see we've got it back.
Yes.
Yay.
Thank you.